Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk Jan Upkes, and on this podcast, I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases, and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech. Thank you for listening. You're about to listen to episode 3 with Arosha Brouwer. Arosha Brouwer is the CEO and co founder of Quan. Quan helps busy teams build healthy rituals to improve employee well being and team performance. This episode was originally recorded at the end of October 2022, and October is Mental Health Awareness Month. On this episode, Arosha and I will discuss why employee well-being should be a strategic priority and not just in Mental Health Awareness Month, but the whole year around. What's it like to be the CEO of a tech startup as a non-techie, and how data and traction throw biases out of the window. So please welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Arosha Brouwer.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Good. The first question I ask everyone who comes on is how you got into your current position, aka why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. So, why do I do what I do? Well, I'm extremely passionate about the topic. Quan, we famously say we're a movement wrapped in software. So every day when I wake up in the morning, I'm reminded that by uh, shedding more light on the topic of well-being, making people more aware, and also helping organizations create a better environment for people, we're improving the world. So that is why I do what I do, and I work with an amazing team. Um, yeah, and I think that we have the ability to positively impact the world. So that's why.
Okay, so improving or making this world a bit of a better place by improving people's well-being.
Absolutely.
Good. And why is well-being an important topic for organizations then?
Many different reasons, but essentially, when people are well, um, that's when you get the best of them, right?
Yeah.
So organizations have an important role because most of our waking hours are spent at work. And so, on one hand, you want people that are well to be at work so that they can do their best work, but also by having an environment where people can operate effectively without a negative consequence on their well-being, it also means that they're also well when they are not at work, which is when they're with their families and with their friends, with society. So it kind of goes hand in hand. Not only are you creating an environment where people are in a better state of mind, etc., you're also creating an environment where people go home in generally happier moods.
Okay, well, that's obviously a good thing. Is it also good for profitability of companies to have better employee well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if you look at the topic of performance, people perform best when well-being is taken care of. I mean, even you just look at the sports world, right?
Hmm.
There's that famous sort of a well-known truth, I guess, which is 10% is performance, 90% is recovery. So if you want people to perform, they need to have time to recover and take care of themselves. And if organizations can do a better job of creating environments which enable or allow people to do that in whatever suits them, um, at the end of the day, you're gonna be having much more high performance.
Okay, so it's also managing the recovery stage, then that plays a role.
Yeah.
And how can organizations facilitate this?
So there's two parts of it. One is it needs to be seen as a strategic priority. Over the last sort of 2.5 years, we've spoken to thousands of people. We've had thousands of people go through the Quan assessment as well. And one of the sad realities in all of this, as we've seen the topic of mental health become more and more important. But still, when it comes to is it a strategic priority, it's not always seen as a, a topic which should be what's the word, guiding a strategy. It typically is sitting in HR as a topic, hardly ever measured, lots of initiatives to improve well-being, but it's not really woven into the core DNA of the organization and how it's run. So one very clear way to make well-being a strategic priority is to put a measure on it. So start measuring how people are, how they're feeling, how teams are. And then secondly, instead of just having a whole bunch of nice to have initiatives that people need to make time for, incorporate it into your core workflow. So teach leaders and teams how to use data to actually improve the way of working, right? So instead of just going to a mental health uh, webinar once a month, teach teams how to actively reduce things which are contributing to stress at work. Maybe it's too many meetings. Maybe it's the fact that no one eats lunch. Whatever it is, but using data, using conversation, teach teams to get ahead of problems by saying, "Hey, this is not right. We need to do something about it." Um, Hopefully, I've answered the question.
Yeah, how does Quan help with that? Because as I understand it, you're data driven as well.
Yeah. That's right. So our platform essentially enables everything that I've just talked about. So our one liner is we help busy teams create healthy rituals, and we do that in two ways. One is we've developed a very holistic assessment, which looks at 5 key dimensions: the body, the mind, meaning, self fulfillment, social connectedness. And we look at it across both personal and work life. We don't believe that there is a well being at work. We believe there's just one well being, and that matters of home and work affect the other. So this holistic score is one part, and it makes individuals more aware of the top 3 things that they should be working on. But we also aggregate it to a team. So then a team is more aware that, this particular quarter, anxiety or work life balance or concentration are the things that we need to address. And that's one part. The second part is we teach teams to do one thing very, very well, and that is to do uh, a team wellbeing retro every quarter. And it's a 2-hour meeting where it goes from sharing insights, looking at these 3 low-scoring wellbeing subdimensions, and then converting them into 1 or 2 rituals to improve that the next quarter. And these rituals are evidence-based, but also peer-reviewed. So it's what other teams similar to you are using. So it's really one part teaching teams and organizations to measure, and the other part creating a systemic way for or a systematic way for teams to continuously check in and improve the way of working. And that's what we do.
Okay, so though in part the strategic prioritization comes also with doing it consistently, I understand.
Yeah, I think, when we look at sort of how a company typically comes up with a strategy and then says, okay, these are the really important things. Usually, straight after identifying what's really important, the next step is creating a metric, so that you could measure if you're hitting that or not. So with us, we have a well-being index or a score. So then the companies can also track, like, are we in a healthy range or not? So that is where I think, from a strategic priority perspective, it means that when you have, your typically scale ups use OKRs, and tech companies. So if you have an
Hmm.
OKR, um, around product metrics and commercial metrics, then from the people side, besides engagement, you should have a well-being metric. So then you're also measuring not just what you are achieving, but how you are achieving it and how the people are. And this is a more holistic measure of how your people are than an engagement metric, because actually engagement is one sub-dimension of well-being.
Hmm. Good. So let's talk startups because you just launched, anyway, you recently launched your first version of the Quan software.
Hmm.
Um, as I understand it, for startups, product launches are high pressure environments.
Hmm.
So how do you deal? How did you deal with that? With the well-being, how did you take care of the well-being while still making sure that things were getting done?
Yeah, that's a good question. So firstly, we use our software. So
Uh,
that's one very clear answer. We're aware of the different um, metrics and sort of what are the topics that we need to address. And then the second thing is we have very open communication and discussion at a team level. And thirdly, what's also very, very important are the manager one-on-ones. Um, and all of those contribute to a culture where people feel safe enough to speak up if the workload is too much, and that expectations are based on both where the organization needs to get to, as well as how people feel. Um, and there are times when this weekend I was working during the weekend. Typically, I don't. Um, and I'm very, very super conscious as one of the co-founders that my behavior sets the not trend, but it sets an example for the rest of the team. So it's important that during times where I am sending emails later at night or working on the weekend, that I then have an open conversation with my team that, hey, this has happened, this is the reason why it's happened, and I'm not making a habit out of it. And so, yes, there are going to be moments of high stress, as many or any organization go through, especially during product launches, but these should be the exception and not the rule. And the team should be discussing, right, we're going to go through a period of high pressure, and then it should relax. And having open communication about that means that people are aware that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not like you're just going through a tunnel up until an exit.
mhm. But I hear you say communication and open and transparent. But I also hear you say that there's an element of accountability
Yeah,
in there, where you say, okay, hey, listen, I've been working this weekend. This is a reason X, Y, Z.
yeah.
How open are you on that in terms of, okay, I understand in a product launch situation, this, yeah, just happens. But I can also imagine that there have been times where you had to cover some bases to avoid problems. Do you also
Absolutely.
openly discuss this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty open culture just by the definition of what we stand for, and um, Quan's mission and the kind of people that we attract. But we have a very open, transparent culture. And there have been plenty of times where I myself have, admitted when I've made a mistake, when I've put too much pressure on myself, typically, and the effects that it's had on me personally. I talk openly about my, I wouldn't say personal life, but life at home. And I do that because I think it's important for the team to also see the other parts of me that are important, and if I'm able to do it, then the rest of the team are encouraged to do that, and I think that's kind of that example setting, that role modeling. I don't know what you would call it. I mean, we're a very small team,
Hmm?
but it's kind of setting the example for how things are done. And it also, when you do it that way, um, then people feel that you know they can also speak up if something's not right. And I think that is fundamentally important. that if the pressure is too much or whatever, that you've got someone sort of stepping up and saying, hey, I don't know if I can do that because of XYZ. And that's what you fundamentally want, right? You want people to be able to address topics directly and in a timely manner. And I think that's where transparency, openness leads to some level of or supports accountability.
Okay, so people need to feel okay to speak up
Oh,
if need.
yeah. There's huge loads of research on psychological safety, but indeed the context that you provide is critical.
Good. Now, you're the co-founder and CEO of a tech startup,
Hmm.
but you're not a tech nerd, as I understand it. So, what do you think it needs to be a good founder or CEO of a tech startup then?
That's interesting. Yeah, well, I think if uh, Lucy, my co-founder, brings the product, amazing product knowledge, having led your hundreds of people in that domain, and having years of experience. We have a fractional CTO who's amazing, and we have a very strong dev team. And what I bring to the equation is the domain expertise. So I understand the topic very well. And I think that at the end of the day, like, we're trying to solve a problem and we're using technology to solve that problem. And so you need people that understand the problem space. You need people that understand what kind of technology you need to have all these different elements, right? And so as long as you bring something to the table, and if you so happen to be the founder or a very good generalist, then you can probably sit in the CEO seat, at least within a startup. um, so yeah, ultimately, how do I lead a tech startup without being a techie? Well, I don't try and lead the technical components. I leave that to the expert that's brought on for that reason. And you work with them to ensure that you have like a very solid and well thought out way of doing things. But I don't think you need to be a technical person to lead a tech company, as long as you have an amazing co-founder, at least leadership team that can do it, would be the answer.
So, let me dig a bit deeper into this.
Yep.
Do you think you don't need any technical knowledge, or do you think okay, just some high level technical stuff and the ability to ask questions is crucial?
Yeah, indeed. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Being able to ask questions, and I did a degree many years ago, like 20 years ago, in business systems, and then I spent the first 10 years as a strategy consultant, and I've worked a lot in digital teams, and so I worked a lot with technical people, and I think having the ability to um, sort of write up, not workflows, but sort of do some kind of logical reasoning and mapping. It means that you can ask questions and then it should logically make sense in your head. Um, but I don't think you need to go into the details of, like, can you code and all sorts of things like that, right? So I think, do I understand the problems place? Yes. Do I understand a high level what the solution should do? Yes. Can I go and code and build that solution? No. And again, we are in the startup phase. Um, um, at some point, and hopefully sometime soon, it'll start to be scale up phase. Um, the question is, at that point, do I have what it takes to be a scale up CEO, right? And what are the requirements at that moment? And so I think, yeah, you don't need technical skills, but you do need a lot of different skills to be sitting at the CEO chair, because your span of control and responsibility is quite wide ranging.
Yeah, was about to say, do you then also need to be able to put a team together?
That is, there was we had a really smart sales coach that we worked with a year early this year, who said that the job of the CEO is twofold. One is to get capital for the company, Now, that could either be through you know, investment or revenue. And the other part is to deploy that capital. And typically, the majority of the capital is deployed on people. So the ability to hire amazing people becomes critically important, or is critically important. So, absolutely, the ability, especially in the early stage, um, people are joining, the purpose, of course, the mission of the company, but largely they are evaluating the founders. So our ability to convey our mission and our ability to attract amazing people is really what's going to guarantee our success.
Okay, so you said that the CEO has two jobs. One is to deploy capital, which includes hiring amazing people to do the job that
Yep.
needs to be done,
Yep.
and the other one is attracting capital.
Yep.
As I understand it, you have been able to raise capital twice now. One was through Y Combinator.
Yep.
Um, and in an earlier episode, one of my guests said that investors look different at a female founder pitching from a male founder. Have you seen that in any way?
We've had a couple of instances, I would say, with like subpar angels.
Hmm.
And, we've had like weird kind of advice given to us from people at that stage that thought, they were helping us raise funds. Obviously, the ones that we raised capital from, we never experienced that problem. And I mean, I've pitched, I think, to at least 60 or 70 VCs, and I've never really walked away thinking that was because I was female or because Lucy and I are female. But I was raised by an engineer, and Lucy's got a very strong product and tech background. So when we go in, we're going in with facts and logic, and when we come out, we're looking at where the story didn't make sense from fact and logic. Of course, I'm not sitting here to deny that bias doesn't exist, because that's just not true. Um, but I believe that when we're talking about the issue of female founders, and not having enough, and maybe not enough getting venture backed, maybe it's that we need to improve the top of the funnel, which means that there's probably a lot of amazing future female founders that haven't taken the leap, um, because of what they've read, or because of because of all these scary statistics. But maybe if we had more of them taking a step forward, then the best of them and the best of us would then just get the funding, because the problem that we're solving and the way that we're going about it is just the best. And there is bias, but I'll tell you one thing which can um, throw that throw all of that out the window, and that's traction. So if you've built something which is selling or being adopted, you've got an amazing team together, and your growth rates really high.
Mm.
I don't think anyone can argue with that, and that's the way that Lucy and I have approached it.
Okay, so you just figured, let's build something that works, and then they cannot deny us funding.
Exactly, exactly. That's what my dad always said. An engineer with 3 degrees, and he always said to me, like, when you're in a room, try to be the person in the room with all the facts, and then all the other opinions is just opinion, right? So if you can say, well, that's all great that you feel that way or think that way, but at the end of the day, this is this is the traction, this is the trajectory, and here's the facts. Like, I think the point is clear, right? so
Yeah.
so that's what we
Uh,
like to lead in with.
okay. Um, you said that we need to increase the top of the funnel, have more people, more women step up to be founders.
Yeah.
Um, if you would let's go back a bit, look back, and if you would give your younger self advice, at let's say yourself at the beginning of this whole Quan adventure,
Mm.
what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give her?
Um, it's something that Lucy and I tell each other now when things look a bit um, gloomy, and that is trust the process. Um, Sometimes you feel like you might be at the end of the road. We don't feel that a lot these days, but we certainly did in the first year. And it was like doom or gloom, constantly. But at some point, um, we started to see that when we thought we'd come to the end of the rope, some extra rope would appear. Um, and I could have saved myself, and Lucy could have saved herself a lot of heartache had we had that gift of hindsight, which is just trust it. And sometimes when things don't work out, it's because something better is around the corner for whatever it's worth. And this whole thing is a process. It's like so just enjoy the moments, and you're going to have a wild ride, and it will be a wild ride, and there'll be ups and downs sometimes in a day as opposed to in a week. But trust the process, and no matter what happens, um, even if it's the worst day ever, it'll get better. And life is more than just you know the company you're building. It's how you treat your people, it's how you treat your family, it's how you treat yourself. And so remember that, and that would be it.
Okay, I just want to circle back a bit to the bias. Um, how does bias impact well-being inside a company? Because surely it exists within teams as well, I would assume.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not um, expert on biases. I'm going to put my hand up straight away, but I can tell you again, when there's data, and you're talking about data, you can't escape that fact. So if a team do an assessment and the low scoring scores are anxiety at work, stress at work, uncertainty at work, um, those are the topics that the team need to discuss. So, even if you're biased and you're like this high performing manager that thinks that this is all part of the startup game, you cannot escape the fact that this is what the team is scoring the lowest on, and hence the biggest concerns within the team. So that would be the answer. So data helps, um, and yeah, like biases to a large extent are your blind spots, right? So um, there are certain things that we just just the way that we're geared. These biases exist, um, to help us make certain decisions much more quicker than normal, right? And so you can't always be aware of it. You can't always be conscious about the bias. So you need to create structures to bring it down to fact, and create structures so that you can address uh, problems in a collective manner, rather than have one or two people addressing it. That would be my response to that.
So bring it down to facts using data
Yeah,
and
yeah,
measurements,
yeah. That helps.
and then discuss on the basis of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so less about opinion. I mean, of course, people can share their stories, but it shouldn't just be like, I think this is what we need to address. No, the data shows that this is the topic that we need to address. There's no excuse in a time like now for us to have people talking about opinions on topics which impact a lot of people.
Agree. I have two more questions left.
Sure.
One is if you would write a letter to your future self, what would you put in that letter?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Um, um, let's assume that there's success for Quan, whatever that looks like. Then it would be a very simple reminder, which is you've committed to spend uh, your future on the topic of well-being, um, and you've made a commitment to look at the topic of education next. So celebrate this win, but remember that the education system, especially when it comes to well-being of children, needs to be your next topic. And make sure you take some time now to go and explore Southeast Asia, because that was a promise that I made myself, which I've already done, but I'd like to go live there. So I think that's what I would say.
Okay. So well, there's a bit of traveling involved as well, I hear.
Yeah, I mean, even now, so
Uh,
I think even now we do it, but I'd love to go and live in Southeast Asia for a bit.
okay. Any particular country?
So I'm Sri Lankan heritage, so it's
Hmm.
maybe going to be Sri Lanka or Thailand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in both countries, I have to say, and I like both countries.
Ah, great.
Food wise, it's yeah, it's different, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's both I really liked very much. So
wonderful.
so thanks very much for a great conversation. If people would like to learn more about Quan and about yourself, where would you like to direct them?
Well, please visit www.quanwellbeing.com. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look under Arosha Brouwer. And I think there's only one person. So happy to connect.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. Arosha and I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation as much as we did. You can learn more about Arosha and about Quan, and of course, connect with Arosha via the links in the show notes. And as usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog. There, you can also find the other episodes of this podcast, plus blog posts about topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech. On the same website, you can also become a member of the Women Disrupting Tech community. And becoming a member has two benefits. One is that you're the first to learn about blogs and upcoming events, and the other is that you get an email once new episodes go on air. To become a member, simply enter your best email address at the bottom of the show notes. If you're listening to Women Disrupting Tech on Spotify, Apple, Google, or Goodpods, would you consider giving the show a rating or a review? Because that way you can help other people find the podcast. And if you want to contribute to more diversity in tech, please consider sharing this podcast with friends, family, and coworkers, because this way you give Arosha and other guests that I have on the podcast the platform they need to make this podcast obsolete in 10 years. Finally, if you want to connect with me, you can do that via the website womendisruptingtech.blog or via LinkedIn. Just look up my name and you'll find me. Once again, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode.